The most insane punishments used by Russian Tsars. The first Tsar of Russia, Ivan IV, was accused of scheming against Ivan Fedorov, a courtier in his court. In his court, Ivan welcomed Fedorov with a regal reception, contrary to all the assumptions. Ivan IV bowed to Fedorov after forcing him to sit on the throne and said, "Only I have the power in all of Russia to make you sit on this throne, and consequently, only I can unseat you." Fedorov was then stabbed to death by Ivan the Terrible right in the middle of everyone. You have to applaud him. Shakespeare, the father of modern writing, himself was unable to come up with such creative ways to end the lives of his characters in Othello and Macbeth. So, in today's video, we will be showing you some of the most insane punishments used by Russian Tsars. Let's get into it. To realize the extent of punishments, we will look into the life of one of the cruelest Russian Tsars, Ivan IV. Ivan, who was only 13 when he was crowned and 16 when he advanced to full power, was a victim of a terrible upbringing and shady politics. Ivan was just 3 years old when his father, Vasily III, the Grand Prince of Moscow, passed away. Ivan Vasilievich spent his entire youth at the whim of aristocrats looking to gain money and power. As his mother Yelena, who was also supposedly poisoned to death, he was now the only successor to the throne. But until he was 13 years old, Ivan remained helpless and dependent at the whim of the boyars, because he was still too immature to rule. Ivan and Yuri were mistreated by the boyars out of desire for power and control, and as a result, Ivan became disillusioned with the entire system. Ivan grieved the suffering he had endured at the hands of the nobles in charge of looking after him. In a letter to his close friend Prince Andrei Kurbsky, he described how he was denied access to adequate clothing, food, and upbringing. Ivan read a lot of books while being frequently left alone in rooms. Ivan studied himself and got frustrated with all the boyars while they quarreled and plotted against the upcoming monarch. Ivan directed his rage toward small animals since he was too young to resolve matters and too enraged to sit down and be quiet. When the birds were still alive, he would remove their feathers one at a time, savoring their suffering. He loved throwing dogs and cats out of his windows and watching them fall from great heights. Ivan had compiled a list of people he wanted to exact revenge on by the time he was 13. The Shayutsky family was the first name on that list. The Shayutskys prevailed over the Belskys in the power struggle of the time, becoming Russia's de facto rulers. Also, they now had control of young Ivan and his younger, deaf sibling Yuri. Thanks to this victory, Ivan, at 13 years old, publicly accused Prince Andrei, the head of the Shayutsky family, of screwing up the state and gave the guards orders to arrest him. Yet the years of torture and torment they inflict on Ivan and his siblings proved to be their downfall. The most plausible version of events is that Prince Andrei was carried to the dungeon and subjected to merciless beatings by the jailers until his life gave out. The nobility, however, spoke in whispers about Andrei being thrown into a pit of ferocious hunting dogs who tore the boyar limb from limb, and then in many more parts. Ivan's resentment of Russia's ruling class extended beyond the Shayutskys, but he did make an effort to be a fair and kind king once he was given complete authority at the age of 16. Throughout his early reign, there was tranquility and prosperity. His decisions brought about changes to the penal code, the creation of a standing army, and the implementation of self-governance. Ivan, a lover of literature, established printing presses throughout Russia, and, following the conquest of the Tatar province of Kazan, he commissioned the building of the beautiful St. Basil's Cathedral. Ivan IV's wickedness, meanwhile, might not have been completely suppressed. According to legend, Ivan IV had the architect of St. Basil's Cathedral blinded when it was finished, so he could never duplicate or surpass its magnificence. Ivan the Terrible didn't stay a benevolent tyrant. Ivan the Terrible didn't stay an altruistic tyrant. His title contains a sizable spoiler about how events actually transpired. The real story, however, is really tragic. Recall Prince Kurbsky, Ivan's childhood pal, to whom he confided his difficult upbringing. Ivan and Kurbsky had a close relationship, but despite this, Kurbsky stabbed Ivan in the back during their campaign in Lithuania, which led to Ivan's humiliating loss. Ivan went back home to seek comfort and regain his strength, but cruel fate had other plans for him. Ivan's first wife, Anastasia, the love of his life, passed away suddenly in 1560. Ivan was already struggling, and this tragedy permanently destroyed his humanity. He was sure that the entire nobility was out to get him and was responsible for his wife's poisoning. He made the decision to leave Moscow and renounce his throne, but with one stipulation. He suggested splitting the countries in two, with one to be ruled by the nobility and the other by him alone, without supervision. The Russian nobles accepted this arrangement because they couldn't control the nation without him, but also because they wanted more authority. Ivan took over again right away and got to work eradicating his enemies. He established his own Oprichnina police force, which had the authority to execute anyone without trial. The ruthless Oprichniniks hated aristocrats more than any other group of people. As a sign that they were on the lookout for traitors, the Oprichniniks rode through the streets of cities and villages while carrying the severed heads of dogs on their saddles. The Oprichniniks' preferred method of execution included boiling alive, impalement, being roasted over an open fire, and being torn apart by horses while still alive. Ivan developed paranoia, conspiracies, and anxiety after the passing of his wife, Anastasia. He started to distrust each and every courtier and noble in Russia, treating them with nothing but contempt and a sadistic outlook. His plan to punish his competitors and put an end to the resistance was made possible by the Oprichnina. Ivan forced tens of thousands to leave Novgorod and the nearby town of Pskov in 1568, simply because he thought there would be an uprising. Almost 150 boyar council members and noblemen were put to death by Oprichnina in Moscow after being falsely or truthfully accused of plotting to overthrow the Tsar, or for merely denouncing the atrocities carried out by the Oprichnina. Ivan, however, felt that this was insufficient, and a year later, he marched to Novgorod with Oprichnina and the entirety of his army. Ivan had it in his head that the clergy and the city officials were working together with Poles and Swedes, killing, dishonoring, torturing, and robbing them. Soldiers approached the churches and monasteries, ransacked them, and killed the priests and monks in the process. Ivan had a special surprise waiting for the archbishop, so he was forced onto the streets. He forced the archbishop to flee by sewing him into a bear's skin, before sending hounds and hungry hunters after him. Let's just say that the death was not graceful. All merchants and traders were hanged or slain, but that was far from the end. Ivan showed little consideration for either ladies or children. The majority of them were eventually thrown into the chilly Volkhov River, where soldiers killed anyone who managed to swim to the banks and flee. Those who managed to avoid being put to death were exiled from the city and forced to walk in the snow until they died from exposure. Although the exact number is unknown, it was thought that Novgorod saw the deaths of about 100,000 people. For Novgorod to fully recover from the invasion, it would take centuries. Ivan destroyed 90% of the city's fields on the way back. The drought that followed as a result killed an equal number of people. Ivan should have been more protective of his families, one would think, given what happened to his parents and wife. Yet in truth, not even his family was immune to his rage. Ivan IV far outmarried Henry VIII by getting married 8 times, and all 8 of his wives met tragic ends. Only his last wife managed to finally see the light of day again, since she miraculously managed to outlive him. 5 of his wives were killed, and 3 of them were imprisoned. Ivan IV, despite his flaws, was considered a champion of the poor and powerless for hating the nobility. He accomplished growing Russia from a small medieval state to a billion-acre empire, but nothing matches his love for violence, bloodthirst, and macabre. So guys, that's pretty much of it. I hope you liked the video. We will see you in our next video. Till then, take care.